Hello again, this is Mrs. Richardson here with another webcast for you covering a new nation, VS.6, as you prepare for tests. Who was elected the first President of the United States? That would be George Washington. As you know, in the former unit on the Revolutionary War, George Washington was a military hero as he was the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. He retired after his duty there in the Army and returned to Mount Vernon. However, the country needed this great man, and so they called him to return, and George Washington would become the first President of the United States. He was the only president who was unanimously elected into office. Name the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. This was also George Washington. As you can see, he was a great leader for many, many years in this new country, the United States of America. Name the person who inspired patriots from other colonies when he spoke out against taxation without representation by saying, "Give me liberty or give me death." This would be Patrick Henry. We are very thankful that Patrick Henry was from Virginia and inspired many, many patriots with his eloquent speeches. What was the importance of the American victory at Yorktown? Remember, it resulted in the surrender of the British and ended the Revolutionary War. General Cornwallis of the British Army surrendered his army to General George Washington, Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Who believed in the importance of having a United States Constitution? He kept detailed notes during the Constitutional Convention. That was James Madison. Once the war was won, a plan of government had to be formed for this new country, and James Madison believed very, very strongly in a United States Constitution, which is a written plan of government. James Madison was very skilled at compromise, and he helped the delegates as they argued back and forth about what should be the laws of our land. The large states were arguing that they needed the most representation, and the small states were arguing that they needed equal representation, and James Madison introduced the Virginia Plan, which helped make both of these sides feel like they had reached an agreement. James Madison was also from Virginia. Who wrote the Virginia Declaration of Rights, stating that all Virginia should have certain rights, including freedom of religion and freedom of the press? This was George Mason. James Madison, after working so hard to develop the Constitution, refused to sign the final copy because of the fact that there was no Bill of Rights attached to the Constitution. He and George Mason believed very, very strongly that there should be a paper attached to the Constitution that gave individual rights of all Virginians and all Americans in this new country. George Mason wrote the Virginia Declaration of Rights for the Virginia Constitution, listing certain rights that every Virginian has. They then proposed that this Virginia Declaration of Rights be used to create a Bill of Rights for the United States Constitution, and therefore that is how our Bill of Rights was formed. George Mason, the author of the Virginia Declaration of Rights. earned the title Father of the Constitution because he helped delegates reach agreement during the difficult process of writing the Constitution of the United States of America. Once again, that was James Madison. James Madison introduced the Virginia Plan, and something similar was adopted for the United States Constitution. It gave a balance of power by establishing 3 branches of government. The first branch was the executive branch. That was run by the President of the United States because the New World did not want a king once they became free from England. So they designated a president of the United States as the head of the executive branch, and their job was going to be making sure that the laws of the land were carried out. There would also be a legislative branch. As we've talked about before, the word legislative means law making. Both words start with an L. That will help you remember. Legislative, lawmaking. That branch would be Congress, and Congress would have the job of making the laws for the United States of America. Congress was also divided into 2 houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives would be based on population. The more population that a state had, the more representatives they would be given. However, the Senate was not based on population. Every state was given 2 senators that would represent them in Congress. The final branch of government was the judicial branch. The judicial branch of government is run by the Supreme Court and the judges. Their job is to decide, number 1, the guilt or innocence of someone accused of breaking laws, and then number 2, deciding if laws are constitutional. This 3-branch government balanced the powers so that no one person could become a dictator of the United States of America. Who is often called the father of our country because he provided strong leadership needed to help the young country and provided a model of leadership for future presidents. That was once again George Washington. George Washington ran for 2 different terms. Each term was 4 years for a total of 8 years total. Therefore, other than Roosevelt, all other U.S. presidents have only run for 2 terms. Franklin D. Roosevelt actually ran for 4 terms of office and was elected. However, after his presidency, it became an actual law that presidents could only run for 2 terms. Once again, this was in an effort to make sure that a dictator did not take over rule of the United States of America. After the American Revolution, Virginia's agricultural base began to change. Where did Virginia's farmers move to find better farmland and more opportunity? The farmers moved from the west and to the deep south. This was caused because of tobacco growth and how difficult tobacco was on the soil. Tobacco strips the soil of its nutrients, and after 3 or 4 years of growing tobacco on a patch of land, that land becomes very difficult to grow further tobacco. As the land became depleted of the nutrients, the farmers decided that they needed to move off of their land to go find better farmland and for deeper, richer opportunities. They left their farms and traveled through the Cumberland Gap, westward, and also to the deep south. Who wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom? This was Thomas Jefferson. Before this statute for religious freedom, there was a state church known as the Church of England that people were required to attend and to support financially. Thomas Jefferson felt that freedom to worship as people pleased was every person's right, and so he wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, which document states that all people should be free to worship as they please, which is the basis for the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. This is that document that Thomas Jefferson wrote, ensuring that everyone had the right to worship as they pleased. So Thomas Jefferson wrote two very important documents: the Declaration of Independence and the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, which document became the basis for the Bill of Rights of the Constitution of the United States of America. That was the Virginia Declaration of Rights, written by George Mason. This can be remembered easily because of the word rights. The Virginia Declaration of Rights led to the Constitutional Bill of Rights. After the American Revolution, what caused many farmers to look south and west for new farmland? Once again, raising tobacco was hard on the land and robbed the soil of nutrients needed to produce healthy crops. As the early settlers migrated west, what mountain range did they cross? The Appalachian Mountains. This is the range of mountains that run on the southwest border of Virginia. The early settlers crossed the Appalachian Mountains through the blank. That would be the Cumberland Gap. A gap is a place where two mountains come together and form a path. That is how the settlers would cross these mountains into the Western Territories. Thank you for your time, and I hope that this has helped you as you review for VS.6 A New Nation. As you prepare for future tests, use this as often as you need to help you learn and remember this material.